Story number 1. The Cursed Snow House. The winter in Nome was unforgiving. The relentless cold seeped into every nook and cranny, turning the landscape into a sprawling expanse of white silence. I had always been fascinated by abandoned places, drawn to the eerie beauty that only isolation could bestow. So when I heard about the Cursed Snow House near Nome, a place shrouded in mystery and haunted by the disappearances of the Thompson family, I couldn't resist the pull to investigate. The locals spoke of the house in hushed tones, their eyes darting nervously whenever the topic arose. According to the stories, the Thompson family had vanished one frigid night in 1952, leaving behind a home frozen in time and signs of a struggle that no one could explain. Since then, the house stood abandoned, a silent sentinel in the wilderness. But it wasn't the absence of the family that unnerved people. It was the sounds that emanated from the house after dark. Laughter and screams echoed through the night, as if the house itself was alive with the torment of its lost inhabitants. Determined to uncover the truth, I equipped myself with a sturdy 4x4 vehicle, a reliable camera, a heavy-duty flashlight, and an ample supply of food and warm clothing. The journey to the house was treacherous, the snowdrifts deep and the roads barely visible under the thick blanket of white. As I drove, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly into the night. Arriving at the site, the house loomed before me, its once vibrant facade now a ghostly white against the darkened sky. The windows were shattered, and the door hung crookedly on its hinges, swaying gently in the biting wind. I felt a chill run down my spine, not from the cold, but from the palpable sense of dread that hung in the air. Setting up my camp a safe distance away, I watched as the sky turned an inky black, the stars obscured by swirling snowflakes. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the faintest sounds of laughter and the distant echoes of screams. I tried to shake off the unease, telling myself it was just the wind playing tricks on my mind. But deep down, I knew there was something more sinister at play. As midnight approached, I decided to explore the house. The snow muffled my footsteps, each step crunching softly against the icy ground. Pushing the door open, creaked ominously, revealing the interior of the house. The air inside was thick with the scent of mildew and decay. Dust motes danced in the beam of my flashlight, illuminating the remnants of a life abruptly abandoned. The living room was cluttered with remnants of the past, furniture covered in white sheets, picture frames shattered on the floor, and a grand fireplace that had long since gone cold. As I moved deeper into the house, the sounds grew louder. The laughter was light, almost playful, but the screams were raw and filled with anguish. They seemed to come from all around me, bouncing off the walls and merging into a cacophony of despair. I reached the staircase, the steps slick with ice. Each step I took echoed unnervingly, amplifying the sounds that surrounded me. At the top of the stairs, I found a hallway lined with doors. The laughter and screams were more intense here, a haunting symphony that threatened to drive me to the brink of madness. I approached the first door cautiously, pushing it open to reveal a child's bedroom frozen in time. Toys lay scattered across the floor, and a small bed stood in the corner, its blankets twisted as if someone had fled in a hurry. As I stepped into the room, the temperature seemed to drop even further. My breath became visible in the frigid air, and the sounds of the house intensified. Suddenly, a soft giggle echoed through the room, followed by a blood-curdling scream. I spun around, my flashlight catching a fleeting glimpse of a shadowy figure darting across the room. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized I wasn't alone. Determined to find answers, I continued my exploration, documenting everything with my camera. Each room told a story of sudden abandonment and untold horror. In the kitchen, pots and pans hung from the ceiling, swaying gently despite the absence of any breeze. The dining room table was set for a meal that never happened. Plates and silverware arranged meticulously, as if waiting for the family to return. In the master bedroom, I found the remains of a journal on the bedside table, The pages were brittle and yellowed, but I managed to piece together the tragic story of the Thompson family. The entries spoke of increasing tension, strange occurrences, and a growing sense of unease. The final entry was abrupt, filled with desperate pleas for help and references to an unseen presence that was driving them to the brink. As I read the journal, the sounds in the house shifted. The laughter became mocking, taunting me, while the screams turned into wails of despair that seemed to pierce my very soul. I felt an overwhelming urge to leave, but something held me in place, a force that I couldn't comprehend. The temperature plummeted further, and I could see my breath crystallizing in the air. Suddenly, the door to the master bedroom slammed shut, and the room plunged into darkness. My flashlight flickered and died, leaving me in pitch blackness. Panic set in as I fumbled to turn it back on, but the device refused to cooperate. The sounds around me grew louder, more intense, as if the house itself was closing in. In the darkness, I heard footsteps approaching, slow and deliberate. A figure emerged from the shadows, a woman with hollow eyes and a face twisted in eternal sorrow. She reached out her hand, and I felt a surge of pain and fear. "Help us," she whispered, her voice breaking. "We can't move on." Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized the depth of their torment. The house was not just haunted by their spirits. It was a prison of their anguish, a place where they were trapped, unable to find peace. Determined to help, I began searching for a way to free them, to break the curse that bound them to this forsaken place. I revisited the journal, searching for clues. It mentioned a ritual, an ancient ceremony meant to release the trapped souls. Armed with this knowledge, I gathered the necessary items: candles, salt, and symbols of protection. The house seemed to resist my efforts, the air thick with malevolence, but I pressed on, driven by a need to bring peace to the tortured spirits. As I performed the ritual in the living room, the house reacted violently. The temperature soared. Flames ignited spontaneously from the fireplace, and the sounds of the house reaching a fever pitch. The spirits of the Thompson family appeared around me, their forms wavering between the physical and the ethereal. With each incantation, the atmosphere shifted, the screams softened, the laughter became a harmonious melody, and the oppressive darkness began to lift. The spirits reached out, their faces now serene, gratitude evident in their eyes. One by one, they began to fade, their forms dissolving into the light that now filled the room. As the last of the spirits disappeared, the house settled into a peaceful silence. The oppressive weight that had held me captive was gone, replaced by a sense of accomplishment and relief. I knew that the Thompson family's souls had finally found the peace they had long been denied. Exhausted but victorious, I made my way out of the house, the first light of dawn breaking through the snow-covered landscape. The cursed snow house stood silent and still, no longer a place of torment but a monument to the power of compassion and determination. Driving away, I glanced back one last time. The house now bathed in the gentle glow of morning light. The legends were true, but they were stories of sorrow and redemption, not just fear and death. I had uncovered the truth and, in doing so, had given the Thompson family the peace they had sought for so long. As I left Nome behind, the memory of that night remained vivid in my mind. The sounds of laughter and screams had transformed into echoes of gratitude, a haunting reminder of the fragile boundary between the living and the dead. The cursed snow house was no longer a place of fear but a testament to the enduring human spirit and the power of empathy in the face of the unknown. Story number 2. Whispers of the Kushtaka. The Alaskan wilderness is a place where nature reigns supreme, where the line between reality and legend blurs beneath the vast expanse of the night sky. I had always been drawn to these remote landscapes, fascinated by the stories that whispered through the pines and echoed across the frozen tundra. But nothing could have prepared me for the night I encountered the Kushtaka, a creature from the depths of Tlingit legend that would forever alter my perception of the wild. It was late October when I decided to embark on my solo expedition into the heart of the Anchorage wilderness. As an avid hiker and amateur folklorist, I sought to uncover the truth behind the tales of the Kushtaka, a shape-shifting being said to lure unsuspecting travelers to their doom. The locals spoke of strange footprints leading into the wilderness, disappearing into ravines with no trace left behind. Skeptics dismissed these stories as mere superstition, but I was determined to find evidence that bridged myth and reality. Equipped with a sturdy backpack, a reliable map, and a camera, I set out on a crisp autumn morning. The forest was a tapestry of vibrant colors, reds, oranges, and yellows painting the landscape in hues of fall. The air was sharp, filled with the scent of pine and the earthy aroma of fallen leaves. As I trekked deeper into the woods, the sounds of civilization faded, replaced by the symphony of nature, the rustling of leaves, the distant call of a loon, and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. By late afternoon, I had established a base camp near a small, serene lake. The water was still, mirroring the sky above, and the surrounding trees stood tall and silent, guardians of the ancient secrets they held. I spent the evening cataloging my observations, noting the peculiar footprints I had found earlier, large, webbed, and unlike any known animal tracks. They led towards a nearby ravine, a dark maw that seemed to swallow the light. As night fell, the temperature dropped rapidly, and a thick blanket of snow began to fall, muffling the sounds of the forest. I built a small fire to stave off the cold, its warmth a comforting barrier against the encroaching darkness. The flickering flames cast long shadows, dancing along the snow-covered ground and lending an eerie ambience to the night. Around midnight, a dense silence settled over the wilderness, broken only by the occasional whisper of the wind. It was then that I heard it, a faint, melodic hum that seemed to emanate from the depths of the ravine. At first, I dismissed it as a trick of the wind, but the sound grew louder, more distinct, like a lullaby sung by an unseen presence. Curiosity piqued. I grabbed my flashlight and camera, deciding to investigate the source of the haunting melody. The footprints led me to the edge of the ravine, where the snow had piled high, obscuring the ground below. Peering into the darkness, I could barely make out the silhouette of a figure standing near the water's edge, his form wavering like a mirage. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding small against the vastness of the wilderness. The figure turned towards me, and I froze. It was humanoid, but its features were distorted, almost aquatic, webbed fingers, a slightly elongated face, and eyes that shimmered with an unnatural light. My heart raced as I realized I was face to face with the Kushtaka. "Help me," the creature whispered, its voice a haunting echo that resonated deep within me. I took a hesitant step forward, trying to steady my nerves. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The Kushtaka took another step, its movements graceful yet unsettling. "Lost? Need to return," it replied, gesturing towards the ravine. "Follow the lights." Before I could respond, the creature began to fade, its form dissolving into the night air like mist under the morning sun. Panic surged through me as I realized I was alone once more, the footprints leading into the ravine disappearing as abruptly as they had appeared. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to follow the path the Kushtaka had indicated. The snow intensified, each flake a sharp reminder of the cold that now enveloped me. The forest seemed to close in, the trees towering above like silent sentinels watching my every move. My flashlight flickered, casting erratic beams that danced across the snow, revealing glimpses of movement in the shadows. As I approached the ravine, the temperature plummeted further, my breath visible in the frigid air. The ground beneath me was slick with ice, making each step treacherous. The footprints ended at the edge of the ravine, where a faint glow emanated from below. I peered over the edge, trying to discern the source of the light, but the darkness below was impenetrable. A soft, ethereal glow began to materialize, forming into small, luminescent orbs that floated gracefully above the snow. They moved in a mesmerizing pattern, weaving in and out of the shadows. Drawn by their beauty and the lingering presence of the Kushtaka, I felt an irresistible urge to follow them. Taking a deep breath, I began to descend the ravine, the orbs leading the way with their gentle luminescence. The walls of the ravine were slick with ice, and the sound of my footsteps echoed off the stone, creating an unsettling symphony of silence and sound. The orbs floated effortlessly, guiding me deeper into the abyss. After what felt like an eternity, the path opened up into a hidden valley, untouched by time and untouched by man. The snow here was pristine, unblemished, and the air was thick with an otherworldly stillness. In the center of the valley stood a crystalline lake, its surface shimmering under the pale light of the moon. The orbs hovered above the water, their glow reflecting off the ice and creating an ethereal dance of light and shadow. There, standing at the water's edge, was another Kushtaka. This one was more defined, its features clearer in the moonlight, turned towards me, and I felt a profound sense of sorrow emanating from its presence. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice cracking under the weight of emotion. The Kushtaka sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of countless lost souls. Trapped, unable to move on, bound to the land by sorrow and loss. I stepped closer, feeling a deep empathy for this tragic creature. "Is there a way to help you?" The Kushtaka's eyes met mine, filled with an ancient pain. "Release us. Break the chains that bind us." I searched the valley, looking for any clues that might help unravel the mystery. In the center of the lake stood a stone altar, etched with symbols that matched the ones I had seen in local legends. My mind raced, piecing together the fragments of stories I had read and heard from the locals. The Kushtaka were guardians of these sacred grounds, their spirits bound to protect the land from those who sought to exploit its secrets. Realization dawned upon me. I needed to perform a ritual to release the Kushtaka from their eternal vigil. Gathering my courage, I approached the altar, feeling the weight of history and sorrow pressing down on me. The air was thick with the presence of countless spirits, their whispers a haunting melody that filled the valley. I began to recite the incantations I had painstakingly researched, my voice steady despite the chill that enveloped me. The symbols on the altar began to glow, the light intensifying with each word I spoke. The orbs of light swirled around me, merging into a single, brilliant beam that pierced the darkness. As I continued the ritual, the Kushtaka gathered around the altar, their forms becoming more defined, their sorrowful eyes fixed upon me. The energy in the valley was palpable, a tangible force that resonated with the ancient magic of the land. With a final, heartfelt plea, I completed the incantation, feeling a surge of power that reverberated through my very being. A blinding light enveloped the valley, and I shielded my eyes from its intensity. When the light subsided, the valley was transformed. The snow glistened with a newfound brilliance, and the air was filled with a sense of peace and release. The Kushtaka stood before me, their forms now radiant with an ethereal glow. "Thank you," they whispered in unison, their voices a harmonious blend of gratitude and relief. "We are free." One by one, the Kushtaka began to fade, their spirits rising like mist into the night sky. The orbs of light dissolved, leaving behind a serene stillness that blanketed the valley. I stood alone, the weight of what I had accomplished sinking in. The legends were true, but they were stories of sorrow and redemption, not just fear and death. As dawn broke, painting the sky with hues of pink and gold, I made my way back to my base camp, the path now clear and welcoming. The footprints in the snow had vanished, replaced by the pristine beauty of the untouched wilderness. The Kushtaka had been released, their spirits finally at peace. Months have passed since that fateful night, but the memory of the Kushtaka and the valley where I freed them remains vivid in my mind. The Anchorage wilderness holds countless secrets, each one a testament to the delicate balance between man and nature. The legends are not just tales to frighten, but stories of respect, understanding, and the enduring power of compassion. If you ever find yourself trekking through the Alaskan wilderness on a cold autumn night, remember the whispers of the land. Listen to the stories carried by the wind, and honor the spirits that guard these sacred grounds. The Kushtaka are a reminder that every legend has a truth, and every truth carries the weight of history and heartache. Story number 3. Whispers in the Blizzard. The snowstorm hit Anchorage without warning. One moment, the sky was clear, and the next, thick white curtains descended, swallowing the city in an impenetrable blanket of white. I had always loved winter, the crisp air, the serene silence, the way the world seemed to pause under a layer of snow. But that night, the storm was different. It was relentless, unforgiving, and it brought with it a haunting presence that I couldn't shake. I was driving home after a long shift at the local hospital. The roads were slick, and visibility was nearly zero. Anchorage's streets, usually bustling with activity, were eerily quiet, the usual sounds muffled by the heavy snowfall. My car's heater struggled against the biting cold, and the wipers barely kept up with the incessant flurries. I glanced at the clock, just past midnight. I should have been home hours ago, but the storm had made everything take longer than usual. As I navigated the familiar route through the outskirts of the city, the landscape transformed. The trees, usually vibrant with winter's embrace, stood as dark, skeletal figures against the storm's fury. The streetlights flickered intermittently, casting ghostly shadows that danced and shifted with each gust of wind. My headlights cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but endless white. I decided to take the scenic route, a narrow road that led into the dense Anchorage woods. It was a shortcut I rarely used, especially in bad weather. But tonight, desperate to get home, I figured I'd brave the storm. The path was winding, flanked by towering pines that seemed to close in around me, their branches heavy with snow. Halfway through the woods, my car began to sputter. The engine coughed and stalled, leaving me stranded in the heart of the storm. I tried to restart it, but it was no use. Panic set in as I realized I was alone, miles away from any help. I grabbed my phone, but there was no signal, no way to call for assistance. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and the temperature was dropping rapidly. With no other options, I decided to seek shelter. The radio mentioned an old ranger station a few miles ahead, but in this storm, it felt like an impossible journey. I gathered what little warmth I could, wrapping myself in blankets and rationing the hot coffee I had brought for the drive. Sleep was the last thing on my mind, but exhaustion began to creep in, pulling me towards a restless slumber. That's when I saw her, a faint figure in the distance, barely visible through the blinding snow. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a mirage born from exhaustion and isolation. But as I squinted, the figure became more defined. She was a woman, dressed in a long, flowing white coat that fluttered in the wind. Her hair was loose, cascading down her back, and her face was pale, almost translucent against the snow. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The woman stood motionless, staring directly at me with eyes that seemed to pierce through my very soul. There was something undeniably tragic about her, a sorrow that emanated from her presence. Despite the danger and the storm, I felt an inexplicable urge to reach out to her. "Are you okay?" I called out, my voice trembling. She didn't respond. Instead, she began to move towards me, her steps slow and deliberate, leaving no footprints in the snow. As she approached, the temperature seemed to drop even further, an icy chill enveloping me. My breath became visible, each exhale a ghostly mist in the frigid air. "Please," she whispered again, her voice more urgent this time. "Help me find my way." I wanted to ask who she was, how she ended up here, but the words caught in my throat. Fear battled with compassion, creating a storm of emotions within me. I took a cautious step forward, the snow crunching beneath my boots. The woman reached out her hand, and I felt a strange pull, a magnetic force drawing me towards her. As I approached, the snowstorm seemed to intensify, the wind howling louder, almost angrily. The woman's face became clearer, and I could see the pain etched into her features. Her eyes, once so pleading, now held a desperate fear. "Don't leave me here," she begged, her voice cracking. "I can't survive the storm." I reached out to touch her hand, but my fingers passed through her like mist. She recoiled, a look of anguish replacing her initial sorrow. "Please," she repeated, tears forming in her ghostly eyes. "I need help." The storm reached a crescendo, and suddenly, the woman was gone. I stood there, trembling, the silence that followed deafening. My mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. Was she a ghost? A hallucination brought on by exhaustion and isolation? Or was there something more sinister at play in these woods? Determined to find shelter, I forced myself to move. The path ahead was obscured by the relentless snow, but I pressed on, driven by a mix of fear and the lingering desire to help the mysterious woman. The forest around me seemed alive, the trees twisting and contorting in unnatural ways, their branches clawing at the sky. After what felt like an eternity, I spotted the faint outline of the ranger station through the blinding white. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived as I noticed the building was in disrepair. Windows boarded up and the door hanging ajar. I hesitated, the memory of the woman's desperate plea echoing in my mind. Summoning my courage, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The interior was cold and damp, the remnants of a once functional space now abandoned and decayed. I lit a flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness, revealing broken furniture and old equipment scattered about. As I made my way deeper into the station, I heard a faint sound, whispers, carried on the wind, mingling with the howling storm outside. The words were indistinct at first, but gradually, I began to make out the desperate plea. "Help me!" I followed the sound to a small office at the end of a narrow hallway. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, pulling me towards a cluttered desk. Papers were strewn about, and an old, faded map of the Anchorage woods lay open, marked with various symbols and notes. One particular mark caught my eye, a symbol I had seen before in local legends, associated with lost souls and tragic deaths. Suddenly, the room plunged into darkness as the storm outside intensified. My flashlight flickered and died, leaving me in pitch blackness. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for my phone, but it was dead, drained of whatever power it had left. The whispers became a cacophony of voices, all chanting the same plea, "Help me! Help me!" A cold breeze swept through the room, and I felt a presence behind me. I turned slowly, heart racing, to face the woman from earlier. Her form was more solid now, her eyes filled with a sorrow that seemed to reach into the depths of my soul. "Please," she whispered, her voice echoing in the confined space. "I can't survive the storm. I need your help." I wanted to help her, to reach out and offer comfort, but my body wouldn't respond. Fear held me captive as she stepped closer, her eyes locking onto mine. The temperature around us plummeted, and I could see my breath in the air, each exhale a visible testament to the freezing cold. "Follow me," she urged, her hand reaching out once more. "I can lead you to safety." Desperation overcame me. I forced myself to move, grabbing her hand as she guided me through the darkness. The storm raged outside, the howling wind pressing against the walls of the ranger station like an angry beast. We moved in silence, the only sounds our footsteps and the relentless storm. Suddenly, we burst through the door and into the blinding white outside. The snowstorm had not abated. If anything, it had grown fiercer. The woman led me down a narrow path through the woods, her presence a comforting anchor amidst the chaos. But as we walked, I began to notice something unsettling. The path seemed to loop back on itself, leading us deeper into the heart of the storm. "Where are we going?" I managed to ask, my voice barely audible over the wind. She paused, her eyes meeting mine. "To safety," she replied, but her voice held a hint of sorrow that made my skin crawl. We continued walking, but the path remained unchanged, the storm showing no signs of letting up. Hours seemed to pass in mere minutes as we trudged through the snow, the woman's presence growing colder and more distant with each step. My hope began to wane, replaced by a growing sense of dread. Then, without warning, she stopped. The world around us seemed to freeze. The storm hushed into an oppressive silence. I turned to face her, but she was gone, leaving me alone in the heart of the blizzard. Panic surged as I realized I was still lost, miles from any semblance of civilization, with no way to find my way back. Desperate, I began to run, the snow whipping against my face, blinding me with its intensity. My mind raced, recalling the map from the ranger station, trying to find a clue that could lead me home. But the symbols and notes only added to my confusion, offering no clear path forward. As exhaustion set in, I collapsed into the snow, the cold seeping into my bones, numbing my limbs. I closed my eyes, the memory of the woman's pleading eyes haunting me. "Help me," she had said, and now I understood the true depth of her sorrow. In the darkness, I heard it again, the whispers, now a distant echo. "Help me, help me," summoning the last of my strength. I forced myself to stand, the storm resuming its fury as if nothing had happened. I stumbled forward, driven by a primal need to survive, to escape the storm and the haunting presence that had consumed me. Hours passed in a blur of white, my body aching, my mind teetering on the brink of madness. Just when I thought I couldn't go on, the storm began to abate, the wind's fury giving way to a gentle, calming hush. The first light of dawn broke through the clouds, painting the snow-covered landscape with hues of pink and orange. Exhausted and disoriented, I found myself standing on the edge of the Anchorage Woods, the city lights visible in the distance. Relief washed over me, but it was tempered by the lingering fear of what I had experienced. I made my way home, each step a testament to my will to survive. Back in the warmth of my home, I tried to process the night's events, the woman's presence, her desperate plea. It all felt too real to be a mere hallucination. I researched local legends and discovered the tragic story of Eliza Thompson, a woman who had been caught in a snowstorm decades ago and never found. Her spirit was said to wander the Anchorage Woods, seeking help that never came. Realizing that Eliza's story mirrored my own experience, I felt a deep sense of responsibility. I couldn't rest while her spirit remained trapped, lost in the very storm that had taken so much from her. Determined to help, I reached out to local historians and paranormal experts, piecing together the fragments of her tragic tale. Together, we organized a memorial and a series of peaceful vigils, hoping to honor Eliza's memory and guide her spirit to rest. Night after night, we gathered in the Anchorage Woods, offering prayers and candles to light her way. Slowly, the sightings of her apparition became less frequent, the whispers growing fainter until they were mere echoes of the past. Years have passed since that harrowing night, but the memory of Eliza and the storm that nearly claimed me remains vivid. I often find myself staring into the winter night, the silence broken only by the whisper of the wind through the trees. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I still hear a faint plea carried on the breeze. "Help me." I've come to understand that some souls wander, searching for closure, for the peace that eludes them in death. Eliza's story is a reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring power of compassion. While the storm may have been relentless, it was my willingness to help that finally brought peace to a restless spirit. If you ever find yourself driving through the Anchorage Woods during a snowstorm, and you see a figure in white, don't be afraid. Offer a hand, a kind word, or simply a moment of your time. You never know whose soul is seeking solace, whose story is yet to be told. In the heart of the storm, amidst the chaos and the cold, lies a chance to make a difference, a chance to help someone find their way home. Story number 4. Shadows over the Alaska Triangle. The sun had barely risen over the rugged peaks of the Alaska Triangle, casting long shadows across the dense pine forests and snow-covered valleys. I had always been drawn to mysteries, the unsolved cases that lingered in the corners of human curiosity. The Alaska Triangle, notorious for its hundreds of unexplained disappearances and eerie phenomena, was a siren call I couldn't resist. Armed with my camera, a sturdy pair of boots, and an insatiable need to uncover the truth, I set out to explore this infamous region. The locals called it the Deadly Land for a reason. Stories of vanishing hikers, missing aircraft, and strange lights dancing in the night sky were commonplace. Skeptics dismissed these tales as exaggerated folklore, but something deep inside me knew there was more to these disappearances than mere coincidence. As I drove deeper into the heart of the triangle, the landscape transformed into a wilderness that seemed untouched by time, the silence only broken by the crunch of my boots on the frosty ground. My first night was spent at a small, abandoned cabin that looked like something out of a horror movie. The windows were shattered, and the door hung crookedly on its hinges. I lit a fire in the old stone fireplace, the flames casting flickering shadows that danced along the walls. As the night deepened, the temperature plummeted, and an unnatural stillness settled over the area. It was then that I first noticed the lights. First, they were faint glimmers of movement in the distance, barely visible against the darkened sky. I assumed they were reflections or perhaps distant campfires from other adventurers. But as the night wore on, the lights grew brighter and more distinct, moving in patterns that defied explanation. They danced in circular formations, hovered inexplicably above the ground, and sometimes zipped across the sky at speeds too fast for any conventional aircraft. I decided to investigate, driven by a mix of fear and fascination. Grabbing my flashlight and camera, I ventured into the darkness, following the trail of lights that seemed to beckon me deeper into the forest. The trees loomed overhead, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out to grab me, the moonlight barely penetrating the thick canopy. Every crack of a twig underfoot echoed ominously, and the cold air seemed to carry whispers that made my skin crawl. After what felt like hours, I stumbled upon a clearing illuminated by an ethereal glow. In the center stood a circle of stones, ancient and weathered, arranged in a precise pattern. The lights converged here, pulsating with an otherworldly energy that made my heart race. I raised my camera, trying to capture the phenomenon, but as I did, the lights intensified, swirling around me in a mesmerizing yet terrifying display. A sudden chill enveloped me, and the whispers grew louder, forming words that sent shivers down my spine. "Leave now!" Panic surged through me as I realized I was not alone. Shadows began to materialize at the edge of the clearing, figures cloaked in darkness that moved with unnatural grace. Their eyes glowed with a malevolent light, fixed intently on me as if I were an intruder in their sacred space. I turned to run, but the forest seemed to shift around me, the trees rearranging themselves to block my path. The lights followed, their pulsating glow casting eerie patterns that disoriented me further. Every direction I took led me deeper into the labyrinthine woods, the sounds of my own frantic breathing and pounding heart the only things keeping me grounded in reality. Desperation clawed at my mind as I struggled to find an exit. But the forest was relentless, the shadows closing in with every step. I could hear the faint cries of those who had disappeared before me, their voices blending with the whispers that now screamed in my ears. The temperature continued to drop, frost forming on my eyelashes and freezing my breath in midair. Just as I felt I couldn't take another step, a faint light appeared in the distance, a beacon of hope amidst the darkness. I sprinted toward it, the oppressive weight of the forest lifting with each stride. As I broke through the tree line, I found myself back at the abandoned cabin, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. The lights had vanished, and the shadows receded, as if the night's horrors had never existed. Exhausted and shaken, I collapsed onto the frozen ground, my mind reeling from the experience. I reviewed the photos on my camera, hoping to find some logical explanation, but all I saw were blurred images of light and shadow, no proof of the supernatural events that had transpired. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to delve deeper into the history of the Alaska Triangle. Local archives and old newspapers painted a grim picture. The area had long been a hotspot for unexplained phenomena, with reports dating back decades. Theories ranged from magnetic anomalies disrupting navigational instruments, to secret government experiments, and even extraterrestrial activity. But none of these explanations fully accounted for the sheer number of disappearances and the consistency of witness reports describing similar experiences. One name kept recurring in the accounts: the Shadow Keepers. According to legend, they were ancient beings tasked with guarding the secrets of the Alaska Triangle, punishing those who dared to uncover their mysteries. Some believed they were spirits of the land. Others thought they were interdimensional entities. Whatever the truth, it was clear that the Shadow Keepers were not to be trifled with. Determined to document my findings, I returned to the Alaska Triangle armed with better equipment and a network of local guides who had lost loved ones to the mysterious disappearances. We set up a base camp near the clearing where I had first encountered the lights, hoping to capture concrete evidence of the phenomena. Days turned into weeks, and our efforts yielded little until the second night. The same sequence of events unfolded: strange lights, the whispers, and the appearance of the Shadow Keepers. This time, however, I was prepared. My team and I had fortified our camp, setting up cameras and sensors to monitor the activity. As the lights descended upon us, we watched in awe and terror as the apparitions materialized around the clearing. The air grew thick with tension as the Shadow Keepers approached, their presence suffocating. We attempted to communicate, to understand their motives, but our efforts were met with silence and increasing hostility. Equipment malfunctioned, cameras distorted, and one by one, members of my team vanished without a trace, their screams echoing through the night before being abruptly silenced. Fear took hold as it became clear that we were dealing with forces beyond our comprehension. The whispers intensified, urging us to leave, but the forest had other plans. The remaining members of my team, driven to the brink of madness, begged me to escape. Reluctantly, I realized that survival was the only option left. As I fled through the twisted forest, the Shadow Keepers pursued relentlessly, their forms shifting and melding with the darkness. The lights guided them, ensuring that no one could hide from their wrath. Every step was a battle against exhaustion and fear, the cold seeping into my bones, threatening to claim me as the next victim. Just when I thought I couldn't go on, the first light of dawn broke through the trees, and the forest released its grip on me. I stumbled out of the Alaska Triangle, gasping for air, the horrors of the night still fresh in my mind. The shadows receded, the lights vanished, and silence reclaimed the land. In the aftermath, I shared my story with the world, hoping to shed light on the darkness that shrouded the Alaska Triangle. But the more I spoke, the more I realized that some mysteries are best left unsolved. The Shadow Keepers remained a silent testament to the unknown, a reminder that humanity is not always meant to uncover every secret. Years have passed since that harrowing experience, but the memories linger like a ghostly echo. I still wake in the dead of night, hearing the faint whispers carried on the wind, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lies just beyond the veil of our understanding. The Alaska Triangle remains a place of fear and fascination, its secrets guarded by the enigmatic Shadow Keepers, waiting for the next soul brave or foolish enough to seek the truth. If you ever find yourself near the Alaska Triangle, heed the warnings of those who have gone before. The lights you see in the sky are not just celestial phenomena. They are beacons guiding the Shadow Keepers to their next victim. And once you enter, you may never leave, swallowed by the very darkness you sought to uncover. Epilogue. in the quiet moments before sleep. I often reflect on that night in the Alaska Triangle. The line between reality and nightmare has blurred, leaving me to question what is real and what is merely a figment of a traumatized mind. My career as an investigator was cut short, the dangers too great to ignore the warnings any longer. Yet, the allure of the unknown still tugs at me, a haunting whisper that I can't entirely silence. Perhaps the Alaska Triangle holds truths that humanity isn't ready to comprehend, guarded by entities that thrive on our fear and curiosity. Or maybe it's a place where the fabric of reality is thin, allowing the supernatural to seep through and reclaim what was once theirs. Whatever the case, the shadows over the Alaska Triangle remain, a perpetual reminder that some mysteries are meant to stay in the dark. So, if you find yourself drawn to the deadly land, remember my story, respect the legends, heed the warnings, and tread carefully, for in the heart of the Alaska Triangle, the shadows are always watching, and the lights are never what they seem. Story number 5. Echoes in the Anchorage Woods. The winter in Anchorage was unforgiving. The biting cold seeped into every crack and crevice, turning the city into a frozen wasteland. I had always found solace in the vast expanse of the Anchorage forest, its dense woods a stark contrast to the urban sprawl. But that December night, the forest held secrets that would haunt me forever. I had moved to Anchorage seeking peace, a break from the chaos of my previous life. The job at the local library suited me perfectly, quiet, predictable, and surrounded by stories of all kinds. Yet, nothing in those stories had prepared me for the reality that awaited me in the heart of the forest. It was a Friday evening when the screams began. First, they were faint, barely audible over the howling wind and the crunch of snow underfoot. Residents living near the Anchorage Woods reported hearing the same horrifying sounds. Raw, anguished cries that pierced the silence of the night. Some dismissed them as tricks of the mind, exacerbated by isolation and the long, dark nights. Others believed in the old legends of lost spirits and creatures lurking in the shadows, hunting their next prey. Curiosity got the better of me. I had always been fascinated by the unknown, by the thin veil between reality and the supernatural. Armed with nothing but a flashlight, a warm coat, and an insatiable need to uncover the truth, I decided to investigate the source of the screams. The forest was a labyrinth of towering pines and thick underbrush, the snow muffling my footsteps and adding an eerie stillness to the night. The temperature had dropped sharply, each breath visible in the frigid air. My flashlight cast long, wavering beams through the darkness, revealing glimpses of the untouched wilderness. As I ventured deeper, the screams grew louder, more desperate. They seemed to emanate from all directions, bouncing off the trees and echoing into the abyss. My heart pounded in my chest, adrenaline fueling my every step. I tried to rationalize what I was hearing, perhaps a wild animal in distress, a person lost and calling out for help. But something about the sound felt different, unnatural. After what felt like hours, I stumbled upon a clearing. Moonlight filtered through the canopy, casting a ghostly glow on the snow-covered ground. In the center stood an old, abandoned cabin, its wooden structure weathered and worn by time. The screams seemed to converge here, emanating from within the decaying walls. I approached cautiously, the door hanging loosely on its hinges. Pushing it open, I was met with a scene straight out of a nightmare. The interior was shrouded in darkness, the remnants of a once cozy home now distorted by decay. Faded wallpaper peeled away, and broken furniture lay scattered across the floor. The air was thick with the scent of mold and something else, something metallic and sharp. My flashlight flickered, casting erratic shadows that danced menacingly around the room. As I took a step forward, the screams abruptly stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed in on me from all sides. I felt a presence, unseen yet overwhelmingly tangible, watching my every move. Then, without warning, the temperature plummeted further, my breath forming ice crystals in the air. The door slammed shut behind me, the sound reverberating through the cabin like a death knell. Panic surged through me as I spun around, trying to locate the source of the noise. But there was nothing, only darkness and the feeling of being utterly alone. I fumbled for my flashlight, but it had died, leaving me in pitch blackness. My heart raced as I strained to hear any sound, but the only thing I could sense was the relentless beating of my own heart. Then, faint at first, the sound of footsteps echoed through the cabin, slow and deliberate, drawing closer with each passing second. A whisper, barely audible, drifted through the air. "Leave, now." I froze, every instinct screaming at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The footsteps stopped, replaced by a low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the very walls. Shadows began to coalesce, taking shape in the corners of the room. Figures emerged, ghostly apparitions with hollow eyes and twisted expressions, their faces contorted in eternal anguish. One of them stepped forward, a spectral hand reaching out towards me. My mind raced, desperately seeking a way out, but my body remained paralyzed. The apparition's eyes bore into mine, a silent plea for release or perhaps a warning, summoning every ounce of courage. I forced myself to move. I turned and fled, the apparitions swirling around me, their wails growing louder, more insistent. The cabin seemed to stretch endlessly, corridors twisting and turning in impossible ways. No matter how fast I ran, the distance remained the same, the screams echoing behind me like a relentless tide. Just when I thought I couldn't run any further, a blinding light pierced the darkness, and I found myself back at the edge of the clearing. The forest stood silent once more, the screams having vanished as abruptly as they had begun. Gasping for breath, I looked back at the cabin, now just a silhouette against the moonlit sky. I didn't stop running until I reached the safety of my home. The memory of that night etched into my mind like a scar. The screams of the Anchorage woods continued, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurks just beyond the edge of civilization. I often find myself staring into the night, wondering what truly lies within those frozen woods, whether it's lost souls seeking redemption or something far more sinister, forever hunting in the shadows. Years have passed since that fateful night, but the echoes of the Anchorage woods still resonate in my dreams. I try to convince myself it was all a figment of an overactive imagination, a product of isolation and fear, but deep down, I know the truth. The screams are real, and the forest still holds its secrets, waiting for the next curious soul to venture into its icy embrace. If you ever find yourself near the Anchorage forest on a cold winter night, heed the warnings of the locals. The screams you hear are not just the wind. They are the cries of the lost, the hunted, and the damned. And once you enter, you may never leave, swallowed by the very darkness you sought to uncover. Story number 6. Whispers of Portlock. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the remnants of Portlock Village. I had always been fascinated by abandoned places, drawn to the echoes of lives once lived within their silent walls. But nothing could have prepared me for the chill that settled in my bones as I stood at the edge of what was once a thriving community. Portlock had been a bustling hub in the 1950s, a place where families built their lives amidst the rugged beauty of the Alaskan wilderness. But one summer, everything changed. Stories of gruesome deaths began to surface, bodies found mutilated beyond recognition, their limbs twisted in unnatural ways. The villagers whispered of a presence, something ancient and malevolent that had driven them to flee, leaving behind only ghostly remnants of their former lives. I had come here to uncover the truth, to piece together the fragments of a mystery that had long haunted my dreams. Equipped with a flashlight, a notebook, and an unyielding sense of curiosity, I ventured into the heart of Portlock just as night began to fall. The first buildings I encountered were still largely intact, their wooden frames weathered by time and the harsh elements. The main street, once lined with shops and homes, now stood deserted, the windows staring blankly like empty eyes. I made my way to what had been the town hall, hoping to find records or clues about the sudden exodus. Inside, the air was thick with dust, each step stirring up particles that danced in the beam of my flashlight. The hall was eerily silent, the only sound my own footsteps echoing off the walls. I found a weathered ledger on a desk, its pages yellowed and brittle. The entries were sparse, documenting daily activities and community events, until midsummer, when the notes became erratic, filled with mentions of strange noises, unexplained disappearances, and an overwhelming sense of dread that seemed to permeate the very air. A sudden gust of wind slammed the door shut behind me, plunging the room into darkness. My heart raced as I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam flickering before stabilizing. Shadows seemed to dance at the edge of my vision, and an oppressive silence pressed in, making it hard to breathe. I left the town hall and ventured further into the village, each building telling a story of abandonment and fear. The schoolhouse stood as a grim monument to lost innocence, its playground empty and overgrown. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that unseen eyes followed my every move. As midnight approached, the temperature dropped sharply. I pulled my jacket tighter, the cold biting through the fabric. The sky above was a blanket of stars, but the moon was obscured by thick clouds, plunging the village into near darkness. It was then that I heard it, a faint whisper, carried on the wind, like a mournful sigh threading through the trees. I stopped, straining to listen. The whisper grew louder, more insistent, forming words that sent shivers down my spine. "Leave now." Ignoring the warning, I pressed on, driven by a need to uncover the truth. The whispers guided me to the old church at the edge of the village, its steeple pointing accusingly toward the heavens. The doors creaked open of their own accord, revealing an interior cloaked in shadows. Candles long extinguished lay scattered on the pews, and stained glass windows depicted scenes of both serenity and torment. In the center of the nave stood an altar, its surface marred by dark stains that hinted at violence and sacrifice. My flashlight flickered, casting grotesque shadows that twisted and contorted the space around me. As I approached the altar, the temperature plummeted further, my breath visible in the icy air. A sudden movement caught my eye, a figure at the far end of the church, barely visible in the dim light. My heart pounded as I took a cautious step forward, the floorboards groaning under my weight. The figure turned, revealing a visage twisted by agony and despair, eyes hollow and pleading. "Why did you leave us?" the apparition whispered, its voice a haunting echo of the past. "The darkness. It consumes everything." I stumbled back, tripping over a fallen pew, and scrambled to my feet. The figure began to move toward me, each step deliberate and heavy, the air around it growing colder with every passing second. Panic surged through me as I realized I was face to face with the very evil that had driven the villagers away. Desperate to escape, I turned and ran, the whispers chasing me through the narrow corridors of the church. The walls seemed to close in, the darkness thickening like a tangible force intent on swallowing me whole. I burst through the doors, only to find the village transformed. The buildings were no longer abandoned but teemed with shadowy figures, their forms shifting and warping in the flickering light of my flashlight. They moved in unison, their eyes fixated on me, voices blending into a cacophony of anguish and rage. I could feel their fear, their pain, pressing down on me, threatening to pull me into their eternal nightmare. The ground beneath me seemed to pulse, the very earth alive with malevolent intent. I ran blindly through the streets, the whispers now a deafening roar in my ears. Every turn led to more apparitions, more evidence of the horrors that had unfolded in Portlock. The sense of being hunted was overwhelming, my mind teetering on the brink of madness as the supernatural force tightened its grip. Finally, I found myself at the edge of the village, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. The apparitions began to fade, their whispers growing faint as the sunlight pierced the darkness. Exhausted and trembling, I stumbled out of Portlock, the weight of what I had witnessed bearing down on me. As I drove away, the village receded into the distance, a silent specter of its former self. But the memories lingered, etched into my mind like a scar that refused to heal. I had come seeking answers, but all I found was a darkness that still haunted the shadows of Portlock. Years later, I still wake in the dead of night, hearing the whispers on the wind, reminding me of the horrors that lie just beyond the veil of our reality. Portlock remains a cautionary tale, a reminder that some places are best left undisturbed, their secrets buried beneath layers of fear and time. And as long as the whispers persist, I know that the darkness of Portlock is never truly gone. It waits, patient and eternal, for the next soul brave enough to uncover its cursed past. Story number 7. Whispers on Dalton Highway. The sun had long since surrendered to the horizon, and Dalton Highway lay cloaked in the obsidian embrace of night. I had always heard the tales, the stories whispered among truckers and lone travelers about the spectral figures that haunted this desolate stretch. Tonight, with only the hum of my engine and the rhythmic clatter of tires on asphalt, I decided to see for myself if the legends held any truth. My truck was my sanctuary, a steel beast that roared defiantly against the silence of the Alaskan wilderness. The dashboard lights cast a dim glow, painting the interior with hues of amber and red. I adjusted my rearview mirror, catching a fleeting glimpse of the road behind me. But nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The vast expanse of snow-covered terrain stretched endlessly, broken only by the occasional signpost and the distant outline of the Denali Range. As I drove deeper into the night, the isolation began to weigh on me. The radio played soft rock classics, a stark contrast to the eerie stillness outside. My mind wandered to the stories I had dismissed as mere folklore. They spoke of apparitions, drivers clad in heavy winter gear, their faces obscured by shadows, standing motionless on the roadside. Some claimed these spirits reached out for a ride, only to vanish when approached, leaving a chill that lingered long after the truck had passed. A cold draft brushed against my window, causing me to shiver despite the warmth of the cabin. I glanced outside, half expecting to see one of those ghostly figures. The darkness seemed to press in, making it hard to discern shapes against the white expanse. I shook off the unease, attributing it to the isolation and the endless night. Minutes turned into hours, and the road remained unbroken, a stark ribbon of black cutting through the snowy wilderness. My thoughts drifted to my family, waiting back home, their faces blurred by time and distance. The loneliness of the highway gnawed at me, each mile marker a reminder of the vastness surrounding me. Then, through the windshield, a figure appeared. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a mirage born from fatigue. But as I drew nearer, the shape became more defined. There stood a person, motionless, dressed in layers of winter clothing. They were waving, a silent plea for help etched into their stance. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached, headlights illuminating their form. "Hey there," I called out, slowing the truck to a stop. The figure didn't respond, merely continued to wave, eyes seemingly fixed on me. I rolled down the window, the cold biting against my skin as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. "Do you need a ride?" I asked, my voice wavering slightly. The figure remained silent, the wind howling around us. I reached for the door handle, intending to offer assistance, but something stopped me. A sense of dread settled over me, thick and suffocating. Before I could react, the figure began to fade, their outline dissolving into the night air as if they were never there. My window frame wobbled slightly, the remnants of the apparition leaving behind a lingering chill. Heart racing, I sat back in my seat, trying to rationalize what I had just witnessed. The radio crackled, snapping me back to reality. I decided to press on, eager to put the encounter behind me. But as I accelerated, the road seemed to warp, stretching into an infinite loop where darkness enveloped everything. Another figure appeared, this one slightly closer, I glanced in the rearview mirror, and there they were again, standing just outside my truck. Eyes locked onto mine. Panic surged through me as I realized I wasn't alone on this stretch of Dalton Highway. I turned the steering wheel, swerving to avoid the apparition, but the road offered no escape. It was as if I was trapped in a nightmarish loop, the highway stretching endlessly in every direction. The temperature inside the truck plummeted, frost forming on the edges of the windshield, my breath visible in the icy air. I struggled to keep control as the figures multiplied, their silent presence pressing in from all sides. They were not just one or two anymore, dozens of spectral drivers, their eyes hollow, their gestures desperate. I tried to reason with them, to offer help, but my voice was swallowed by the howling wind. Each time I attempted to engage, another figure appeared, blocking my path, their faces contorted with sorrow and longing. It was then I understood the highway was a purgatory, a liminal space where lost souls wandered, forever seeking passage they could never attain. Desperation clawed at my mind as I fought to break free from the spectral grip. The road seemed to twist and bend, defying logic and physics, leading me deeper into the heart of darkness. Memories of home, of warmth and light, flickered at the edge of my consciousness, but were quickly snuffed out by the encroaching gloom. In a final, frantic effort, I slammed the brakes, the truck skidding to a halt. Silence descended, broken only by the distant howl of the wind. I sat there, heart pounding, eyes darting between the empty road and the remnants of the apparitions. The snow had stopped falling, leaving a pristine blanket that seemed untouched by the horrors that had unfolded moments before. Gathering my strength, I started the engine and began to drive again, the headlights cutting through the darkness like beacons of hope. The road ahead remained empty, the spectral presence seemingly lifted. As I continued my journey, the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky, painting the horizon with shades of pink and orange. By the time I reached the next rest stop, the sun was fully risen, banishing the shadows that had plagued my night. Exhausted and shaken, I stepped out of the truck, the cold morning air refreshing against my skin. Looking back, Dalton Highway stretched out behind me, silent and unassuming once more. I never spoke of that night to anyone, the memories lingering like a haunting melody in my mind. But sometimes, when the night is especially still and the road is blanketed in snow, I can't help but glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see those ghostly figures waiting for another lost soul to wander into their eternal twilight.